What's up, YouTubers and plant lovers? It's Justin coming to you from the Big Blue Nation once again, and today I was going to discuss with you a problem that my hibiscus is having. As you can tell, it's exhibiting signs of the yellow ring of death. Now, just because your hibiscus is exhibiting signs of the yellow ring of death doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be an omen of death. And it probably won't look like a ring like mine is. You'll probably experience several leaves, hopefully most at the bottom. These are the older leaves and they tend to kind of tire out and stress out and fall off first. And for the most part, it's normal for your hibiscus to actually have some leaves turn yellow and fall off. But when it starts to be a lot, or at least several of the little bitty leaves that it actually has, you want to investigate that and see what's probably causing this problem. Now, I have several reasons that your plant may be exhibiting some stress and actually starting to stress out and exhibit yellow leaves and then fall off. The very first one I wanted to look at was not enough water. These very nice, full, voluptuous leaves need a lot of water in order to keep the plant healthy and the cells turgid so that the leaves will kind of stick out and get the adequate amount of sunlight that the plant needs. So it needs a lot of water, especially if it is hot outside. As the temperature goes up, you need to remember that the water intake needs to go up for the plant as well. Water is very important to a tropical plant, let alone a hibiscus. They do like a lot of it. It's not as forthcoming with the fact that it needs water as other plants are. If you saw my last video on the Arabica plant, the coffee tree, its leaves were a really good indication that it actually needed water. It would, start to sag and droop and everything. This one, you'll be able to tell that the leaves are sagging somewhat, but other than that, and once the leaves start to kind of wither up and shrivel and everything, that's actually really stressful on a plant and is, too far. So you want to try and catch it before the leaves actually start to wither and droop and all that. So just make sure that your plant is getting enough water, especially if it's really hot out, because if not, the leaves can turn yellow and fall off. The second one would be that it's getting too much water. So you do want to be careful, and it's on the complete opposite end of the spectrum because the hibiscus can get too much water. And like I said, it is a tropical plant. They do like a lot of water. They like their soil to be moist, not soggy and saturated and dripping all the time. So this actually can cause all kinds of problems. So you just want to kind of keep an eye on that and make sure you're not giving it too much. Though if it is in the heat of the day and you're in the dog days of summer, you may have to water your plant once or twice a day. Other than that, it might be a little bit too much, and then once you get root rot, your leaves will definitely all fall off and you'll lose the plant then. So just kind of keep an eye on it. And I'd say that too much water is probably the main reason that hibiscus leaves do turn yellow, especially with newer growers and inexperienced growers. Too much water can be a problem. Now, back as I was talking about not enough water, if you can tell or you can look at your soil and see that the soil is actually shrinking away from the pot, that is a really good indication that your plant is not getting enough water. And anytime that happens to any plant, that's not a good thing because you are compacting and constricting the roots, and that will stress the plant out. So make sure that soil is not receding from the inside of the pot, because that is a good indication that you're going to need some more water. Following the dog days of summer, if your hibiscus does get too hot, that can cause your leaves to actually stress out and your plant to stress out. The leaves will turn yellow in this case also, and then they'll start to drop also. So you got to be careful if it gets too hot. I like to keep mine in a position where during the hottest part of the day, it's in some shade, because they are tropical plants and they love the sunlight and they love the heat. They don't like too much of it. I'd say anything over 85 to 90 degrees is too much. So if you know it's going to be 90 degrees or higher, I would place my plant somewhere that it's going to have a break from the hottest part of the day of the sun. So just kind of be conscious of that and think about that if you're going to be coming into a heat wave pretty soon. Like I said, it is summertime, so be mindful of that. A lot of people think, they are tropical. They need sunlight, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and they do, but they don't have to have direct sunlight all the time. So just kind of pay attention to that because, like I said, it will stress the plant out and the leaves will turn yellow and fall off if it's too hot out. And on the complete opposite side of the spectrum again, if it gets too cold out, the plant's leaves will turn yellow and they will start to fall off. Now remember, this is a tropical plant, so it doesn't like to be in temperatures lower than 65, 60 degrees. And once it gets lower than that, you will start to stress your plant out. And that's when the leaves will start to turn yellow and they will start to fall. This is a tropical plant, so it does not like to be colder than about 60. It can survive down to almost freezing, but once it gets to freezing, your plant probably will die. It cannot withstand freezing temperatures at all, so don't forget about it in the fall. And it needs to be one of the first plants you do take in, because this is a tropical plant and it does not do well in the cold. Like I said, it will survive in 50-degree weather, but you are going to stress your plant out. So be very careful and mindful of that, or you will lose leaves because of the cold as well. And then again, back to sunlight. It does not need direct sunlight. So make sure that in the morning or at night you're getting some sunlight there. In the noon, hot part of the day, no direct sunlight on the leaves. These leaves will burn. In fact, when they do, you'll see great white spots on them. Those are equivalent to sunburn on us. So if you're seeing white spots on your leaves, you've burned your leaves, and that will stress your plant out. And if you have stressed your plant out and stressed your leaves out, the leaves will turn yellow and they will fall off. So be very mindful of that, because the hot sun will wreak havoc on these leaves. Now, like I said, mine, I have it where it will receive ample morning light, then be in shade the rest of the day. And that is kind of ideal for the plant. Around 4 or 5, if you have it in a western facing window and it gets the evening sun, that can be okay too. But in the wintertime, if you have it inside, be mindful of a south-facing window, because some of the direct sunlight can scorch the leaves. Now, hopefully, with it being outside all summer and you put it in the south-facing window, you won't really have to worry about that, because the sun is a bit weaker in the wintertime. But if there's a lot of direct, bright sunlight on it, it can hurt your plant. So just be mindful of that as well. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum again, too little sunlight will actually cause the leaves to turn yellow and fall off. And this is simply because the plant isn't getting enough green chlorophyll, and it's not able to produce the food that it needs in order to survive and keep all of these nice, beautiful, luscious green leaves. So if the plant isn't getting enough sunlight, the leaves will start to turn yellow and drop off, so that it doesn't have to support so many leaves with a lesser amount of chlorophyll. So just be careful for that, because it does need somewhat of a Goldilocks zone on the sunlight. Not too hot, not too cold. All you need is just the right amount. So just kind of play around with that and make sure you're not burning it, but actually giving it some direct sunlight. I know it's easier said than done, but just kind of play around with it and see what your plant responds best to, and kind of go from there. Insects, particularly spider mites, can be a big problem for hibiscus plants and actually cause yellow leaves. And unfortunately, a lot of people can't see the spider mites with the naked eye, but there are some telltale signs that there are an infestation on your plant. And if you kind of look around the leaves, that's a real good reason why I like to actually bring these plants indoors, is so I can kind of give them a once over and see if there's anything on them infection wise, or just to go around and look at the leaves to see what they're telling me. Now, with the spider mites, they tend to latch onto the leaves and start sucking all the juices out, and that will stress the plant out. So you will be able to see marks on the leaves where the spider mites are draining the leaves of their valuable juices. So you'll want to tell with that. And then on the undersides of the leaves and on the tops of stems, you'll see tiny little spider web looking things. And that's from the spider mites. So if you can see a bunch of looking like spider webs and glossy, kind of like really thin filaments, you may have a spider mite infestation on here too. And that will stress your plant out to the point where it could lose every single leaf on it. And if that's the case with spider mites and any kind of infestation like that, the quickest key to recovery is actually catching it pretty fast and noticing it. So I always like to give my plants a careful look over at least once every other day or every handful of days, at least once a week. Try to look at your plant to see, are there any marks on the leaves? Are there any circles or, sunburn rips and tears in it, or webs, or just whatever? Because there are 1,000 things that really could go wrong with this plant. So I do like to just kind of check it and make sure I don't see any marks on the undersides of the leaves as well, or the top. and look at your stems. And then if you are like me and you have mulch, just kind of look over it too to make sure not a bunch of small stuff or anything is actually crawling around on it. And see if you see any kind of mold or mildew or any kind of other pest or fungal disease that might be down in the mulch or just simply around your plant. So that is a really good way to catch this early and to actually ensure that your plant will survive. The one that's not as obvious is the wind. A lot of people don't realize the kind of stress that the wind plays on plants. It can actually dry your plant out relatively fast. So if it is really windy out but it's not so hot, your plant may actually be a little bit dehydrated. It might have its water wicked away, especially if it's in a terracotta pot like I have mine in, because the terracotta pot is so porous, it actually can whisk a lot of the water away from the soil and absorb that valuable water intake for the plant. So just be mindful of that, whatever kind of pot you have it in, and if it's windy or not outside, because with the wind coming in very fast, it will dry your plant out. And it will also kind of mess the leaves up as well. So the wind can actually be a really high stress level for a plant. And that may be a reason why your leaves are turning yellow and starting to fall off. Improper nutrition, fertilizer feeding, the pH soil, chlorosis, that can be a reason why leaves turn yellow. And in fact, with some of the leaves in chlorosis may actually turn kind of halfway yellow, halfway green, kind of be splotchy or something like that. That's often a sign of malnutrition. The plant isn't getting enough nitrogen or any potassium or phosphorus or anything like that. So just be very careful to look your leaves over to make sure that they're not all the way 100% yellow or all the way 100% green, because that's probably a nutritional problem. So if you do kind of use like Miracle-Gro, Fox Farm, or any kind of other substrate that is supposed to have food in there, make sure you're not going on top of that and feeding your plant also, because a substrate like Miracle-Gro and Fox Farm has enough fertilizer in there that it can actually last your plant for several months. And if you're going over and feeding them on top of that, you will burn your plant out. And this can cause your leaves to turn yellow as well. Now, if that is the case, they do offer some kind of stuff that you can amend your soil with to balance out the pH. I believe bone meal, blood meal, stuff like that kind of works. So just look that up and see. But improper nutrition will wreak havoc and stress your plant out as well. And then the last reason that I really wanted to talk about why your leaves may be turning yellow is probably the least common reason, and that hopefully is the least common reason, is a pesticide use. Especially if it's a hot day out and you apply it early in the morning and then you set your plant out in the sun, that will burn your leaves out and kind of stress the plant out as well. I always like to apply my chemical, if I use any of it at all, I like to do it later in the day, around 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night when the sun's kind of at its weakest, and it's not going to actually burn through the leaves with the actual chemicals on top. So just be mindful, and if you are using something new, I would test it on a little area first before actually covering the whole plant. Now, that being said, I like to go the organic way. I like to actually maybe use ladybugs to help if you have spider mites. And if you do have spider mites, another way that you could wash them off is to take them and put them in your bathtub and spray the plant down with your little detachable shower head, or just take it out back and use your garden hose and put it on the shower setting and spray it off, because these pests have no way of actually attaching themselves to the plant, so they're knocked right off real easily. And that's actually how Mother Nature does it. She'll just send a little storm through and it will actually knock all the pests off in the form of rain. So if you do have a problem with the pest, I would try using water, or if it's something a little bit stronger, feel free to take isopropyl alcohol, rubbing alcohol, apply it on a washcloth, and just kind of wipe your plant off like that on both sides of the leaves, stems, and everywhere, and just kind of rub it off, and then that will actually kill anything else that's on there as well. And like I said, if you're having problems still after doing those two things, 3, if you include the ladybugs, I would get some neem oil. That is kind of smelly, so be careful and apply that outside. Or consider using something a little bit stronger than that as well. But if you do have to use chemicals, don't use a whole lot, use it sparingly. And like I said, test it before you actually do. Because if you don't, then you can actually kill your whole plant. Oftentimes a little bit goes a long way. Now, that being said, these leaves are not fully dead yet. They still do have a little bit of green in them, so they are probably still draining valuable nutrients away from the plant. So they are, I believe, pinnately compound almost. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove these yellow leaves so that they're not actually draining away valuable nutrients and water from the rest of the plant. Now notice I'm not throwing these leaves away. I'm going to throw them away outside just in case they do have any kind of pest on them. If you do throw them in the trash, they can just crawl out and attack any of your indoor plants or any of the plants close by. Now I will try to update you on this. Hopefully, or one of these reasons was actually the reason that this plant was stressing out. And ideally, if you are able to tell what is stressing your plant out, just simply remove that stress from the plant. If it's too windy, put it on your porch or somewhere that it's not going to get a whole lot of wind. If it's too dry, add water, and then your plant should be a little bit more resilient and bounce back, hopefully. Other than that, I hope this video does help you all. Like I said, there are several factors that could be causing stress to your plant, so just take some of these factors into consideration and just help your plant out if possible. Other than that, I hope you guys have a good one. Feel free to leave me a comment and hit the subscribe button and the bell next to it. That way you'll know anytime that I've uploaded a new video. Until then guys, you all have a good one. Don't forget, always plant prudently. Thank you, YouTube.